So the low-income housing program was established to allow low-income tenants to live in affordable housing. When tenants move in, they must qualify at the AMGI levels that we talked about before. So we've got the set-asides of 20 at 50 or 40 at 60. Their income levels must be below that 50% or that 60%. But what happens when, after living there for a year, we perform a recertification and determine that this household that originally qualified when they first moved in no longer makes below that limit? Treasury Regulation 1.42-15 gave some guidance as far as allowing those tenants to stay in the unit. The reason being is you don't want to penalize a household for bettering themselves. So they move in and they're in a really bad predicament, and they get a raise and we kick them out. That's not the intent of the program. So there's these rules in place so that that household can continue to stay in the unit. When we come to recertification, if a tenant makes to 140% of the limit, nothing needs to be done. The initial qualification is required, obviously, but after year one, if the household's income goes over 140% of the applicable limit, then you have to follow this next available unit rule. And you need to rent the next available unit of comparable or smaller size to a low-income tenant. So we've got a 9-unit property. You can see the large units, the medium-sized units, and the smaller units. We've got 3 market rate units. We've got 6 low-income units. So our applicable fraction right now is the floor space fraction is 66.67, and the unit fraction is also 66.67. This tenant right here has now gone over 140% of the limit. This is on recertification. They initially qualified. They come up for recertification. They're over 140% of the limit. If this unit becomes vacant and then we lease this unit to a market rate tenant, we lose qualification of that tenant that was over 140% of the limit. So that's a violation of the next available unit rule. At that point, our applicable fraction is 55.56, which is less than we were intending. If instead this unit, the larger unit, becomes available, it's a market rate unit, and we lease that to a market rate tenant, do we lose this unit? No, we're still okay. The reason why is because that unit that became available was not of comparable size or smaller. So if I've got another building in this same property, and we've got a vacant market rate unit in this other building, can I move a market rate tenant into that building, in that unit? Yes, because this is a building-based rule. If we get this smaller unit, this comparable unit or smaller becomes vacant, and we move in a low-income tenant, we're following the rule. Our applicable fraction is now 75.9 for floor space, 77.78 for our unit fraction, because that unit that went over 140% still continues to qualify, and we also added this other low-income tenant. So our applicable fraction has actually gone up. Can we now rent that unit, that over 140% unit, at market rate? Can we start charging them the higher rent? No, we can't, because if we got rid of that 140% unit, our applicable fraction would then be 64.81 rather than 66.66. So we still have a reduction in our applicable fraction if we did that. So let's continue this scenario if we've got another vacant market rate unit. We have to continue to follow the next available unit rule and lease this unit, because it's of comparable or smaller size, to a low-income tenant in order to keep that over 140% unit qualified. So once we've leased that unit to a low-income tenant, at that point we have the option of converting that tenant to a market rate tenant and charging them market rate rent. But we can't do that until we have replaced them So until we fix our applicable fraction and get it back to at least where it was before. And now if this unit that we leased earlier became vacant, we can now lease this to a market rate tenant again, right? Because we've already fixed our applicable fraction with that unit in the middle on the top. So it's okay to lease that to a market rate tenant. We've got still the applicable fraction back to where it was originally. You have to continue following the next available unit rule. It's just not the immediate next available unit. It's every unit that you need in order to get your applicable fraction where it needs to be. Now, if you've got 3 units, or all of your low-income units are over 140%, and you violate this rule, so your market rate unit becomes available and you lease it to a market rate tenant, you lose the status on all of your units that are over 140%.